All right, we'll go ahead and get started, and then just let everyone else trickle in. So thank you so much for joining. Happy Wednesday. We are so excited to have you here, hosted by Poppins and Nurturing Nannies. Today, we're going to dive into Nanny Pay 101, taxes, leave, and legal protections in Minnesota. So we'll go over everything that you need to know about being paid as a nanny in Minnesota. All right, I'm going to do just a brief overview of what we're going to get into, and then we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to start, I'm going to introduce you to your hosts, then we're going to dive right in. We'll start with W-2 versus 1099. What is the difference? What does it mean to be paid over the table and why that matters? Some Minnesota state-specific rules, why having a contract matters, and how to have the conversation about legal pay. At the end, we'll have time for a live Q&A, so if you have any questions that come up, feel free to write them down or keep them handy, or you're more than welcome to send them in the chat at any time, and we'll go over them all at the end. All right, Rachel, take us away.
And my unmute button, I wasn't sure. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, I'm Rachel. I am the owner of Nurturing Nannies, and then a little bit about my background is I am actually a career nanny myself. So I have about 25 years, gosh, it's dating me, 25 years experience in the industry. Probably out of those 25, I've been a nanny for 16. So dealt with families from all different backgrounds. And I currently am still a nanny slash household manager for ultra high net worth family. So I've kind of been from the bottom and worked my way up to the top, and then done a little bit of everything in between, including travel nanny. So there's not a whole lot that I don't have hands-on experience with. Rota nanny is the only thing I think that I don't. So there's some facts up there, and then just gonna pop it over to Molly.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Molly. I work with Poppins. I work with our customer support team here at Poppins. So typically, if you're calling in, you're talking to someone like me or someone on my team. A little bit background with Poppins. We are $49 a month. We've been trusted by many, many families. We just hit our 10 years as a business, which is super exciting. So yeah, we've been loved by many people with Poppins. We answer our calls within a few seconds. So we always want, if you have questions as an employee or your employer has questions, we're here to answer your questions. So give us a call. We always try to have it like 10 seconds or less. We're answering that call for you. We are sitting at a 4.8 Google star rating, which is fantastic. Kind of shows how much that we've put into our clients over the years. And then we are in all 50 states, which is exciting too.
Great, let's go ahead and dive in. Section 1, Molly is going to take us away.
Perfect. So we're going to go over W-2 versus a 1099 contractor and what the difference is. Awesome. So really, what's the difference between the two? What Poppins specializes in is household employment, which you would be considered a W-2 employee. What kind of separates the two things is when a caregiver works in a home, families don't really realize that they become a household employer under IRS rules. So if you are a household employee, or you are, a household employee, if you work in someone's home and the family is controlling what and how the work is being done. If the family is control of the work and how it's being done, you are considered a W-2 employee instead of a 1099 contractor. So 1099 isn't necessarily correct for nannies. A 1099 is meant for independent contractors. That's people that set their own schedule, control how the work is being done, and work independently across multiple clients. Sometimes people get a little confused if they're in a nanny share, which we can definitely talk about too. Being in a nanny share where you have 2 different employers, maybe 3 different employers who are paying you, you're still considered a W-2 employee instead of a contractor, because those families are still controlling what time you're there and, what's being done around the house, how you're helping their kids and everything. So you would be considered a W-2 even if you're in a nanny share. This structure does not apply to most nanny roles, and applying it can result in misclassifying a household employee as an independent contractor. So we definitely want to help, nannies get it straight that you should be receiving a W-2, because there's so many benefits that we're going to get into in this webinar about what those benefits are to you because you're a household employee.
That's me. Okay. So why being paid legally matters. Perfect. Okay. So another thing, just kind of piggybacking off Molly, what she was saying too about the 1099. If you are getting paid on a 1099, you are going to be paying more in taxes. So that takes the family off of it and they don't have any pay in. So you're going to be actually paying double taxes and getting that withheld. So just a fun fact on that too, which came to my mind. Okay. So why being paid legally matters. So one of the biggest things, at least for me, and this is what I've learned throughout my years, is if you're not being paid legally, you like via W-2, you don't have proof of income, which means that you aren't able to apply for a car loan or even potentially an apartment. It really affects you down the road. Like it might not affect you so much as a high schooler or even in college, like just trying to get settled and do that. The big shift for me was when I decided that this is actually going to be my career. And that's when I started looking at things differently. So had a couple rude awakenings of things that like applying for a car loan, like, oh, I probably should have thought about that before. Or with the way apartments are right now, like you have to have proof of income in order to be able to qualify for a nice place or even a place. So those are big things to factor in. Unemployment benefits. So I'm sure you at some point in your career have had it where you are let go. So if you're not being paid legally, you cannot apply for unemployment. So that's another big one. The Minnesota paid family and medical leave. So this one's new this year. This is one that you have to be paid via W-2 because you have part of the tax get withheld. So if you're not paying into that, you can't actually apply for that. So I think we talk more about that down the road too. So if you have questions, make a note. We can talk about those later. Social Security and Medicare. So if you're not being paid on a W-2, those don't get withheld. And then when it comes down the road, you haven't been paying in for those, so they aren't going to help you in your retirement. Workers' compensations, kind of the same thing. So if your family isn't paying you legally, they're not carrying workers' compensation insurance, which legally in Minnesota, they are required to, but because some people misclassify or also some families may not know, right? So it's our responsibility to kind of advocate for ourselves and kind of help make sure they're doing that. So if they're not paying on a W-2, if they don't carry workers' compensation and you get injured on the job, that comes out of your pocket. And usually with that too, down the road, they will potentially, you can get in legal trouble because they realize that you're not being paid legally. So just avoid it. Make sure that your family is carrying workers' compensation for you. And then also just for the professional credibility. So we as nannies, it's kind of an industry that started out, a lot of people think like it's something easy. I can just make a couple extra dollars in high school, college, help, pay the bills. And then they realize how much they fall in love with it. So because it's not super structured and there's not many rules to it, it's kind of our job to like make sure that we're making sure that we are seen as professionals and not just the help or the babysitter, right? I think we can go to the next slide.
Perfect. So we're going to get into some more things just about Minnesota. Go to the next slide here. Perfect. Okay, so a few things that affect your pay for working in Minnesota. So making sure that everybody knows, overtime pay. Typically anything required over 40 hours in a work week, you should be paid time and a half. Pay stubs are required. So you should always receive an itemized pay stub of each pay period. That's something with Poppins. Every payday, you would automatically get a pay stub emailed to you, which is just nice to see all of your deductions and what breaks down to that net pay. Hourly pay is standardly, what the heck am I saying? Is standard, how about? Household employees are generally paid on the hour and not salary. And then having a written notice of pay and terms is required. You should always have the details like your pay rate, the schedule, the job expectations up front. And this is something that we can help your employer with. We have something such as a contract that they can kind of work off of. But for any nanny in this call, it is so beneficial to always ask for a contract up front, just laying out everything for your own protection. And then minimum wage laws. So this is a big one. We want to make sure as employees that you're getting paid what the state is requiring. We have, and I'm going to have Hannah post it in the chat here, but you can always check out our resource page for Minnesota, which is going to have all of the labor laws that we provide to your employer. But it's also a good resource to employees too, so that they know what they should be paid, all these different laws that go into place for Minnesota. But definitely make sure that, you know, when you're starting a job, you're kind of looking over all of these things and standing up for yourself for what's right. Going to the next slide. Perfect. So a couple more benefits with Minnesota. So earned sick leave and safe time. So every employee who's a W-2 employee in Minnesota should be earning 1 hour for every 30 hours worked of sick and safe time. This is a cap of 48 hours per year, and it can be used for illness, appointments, you know, anything that you might need to take that time for. Rachel just mentioned this, but workers' comp insurance. So this is something that your employers must apply for, they need to obtain. And again, this is just to cover you if there's any work-related injuries. You know, you never want that to come down to you, that you have to cover your own, your own injury bills or whatever medical bills that might arise. Workers' comp is such an important thing, and it's so great that Minnesota actually requires employers to obtain this insurance. Not every state is that way, so that's a great thing. And then paid family medical leave. This is brand new to 2026 in Minnesota. A lot of states are starting to switch to make this a regulated tax that everybody has to pay into. Again, this is statewide. It's for extended leave. It covers medical, family, caregiving needs. And this is so important for you being a household employee that, you know, you get this benefit. You know, why should you lose out just because you're being paid under the table? You know, get paid across board, make sure you have those taxes coming out. And if something comes up, you have this benefit, which is so great. And then rest and meal breaks. So required based on hours worked, and making sure that you get a break throughout the day. You know, running around with those kids, that's exhausting. I'm a mother, so I can't even imagine, you know, being a nanny and having those kids running around and stuff. It is exhausting. So making sure that you know that you're entitled to different rest and meal breaks throughout the day too. Perfect. So getting into a little bit more with this Minnesota paid family leave, it's a huge deal for nannies. So the catch is you can only access Minnesota paid family leave if you're classified as a W-2 employee. So if you're considered a contractor or you're being paid, you know, technically under the table, you wouldn't get this benefit from the state if you ever needed it. The way it works is there's premiums that are withheld from your paycheck, and then it's matched by your employer. So both employer and employee are paying into this. And then what that means to you. So you can get up to 20 weeks of paid leave per year, depending on what the situation is. It covers your own serious health condition, covers bonding with a new child. So if you have a baby, this is something you can apply for with the state, and they'll pay up to 12 weeks. If anyone in your family becomes ill, you know, you need to take care of them, this is something you can also apply for. And then it's funded through your payroll, you know, the tax deductions from your paycheck. So a great new benefit for Minnesota employees for the whole state. And we can't stress this enough. This is such a huge, you know, thing to take off your plate if anything was to happen that you need this paid time for. Perfect. And then for any employers in the call, we have a little snapshot on here of what it looks like in the tax settings. Up at the top, it starts with like the federal and state tax withholdings. And then if you scroll down a little bit, there's a place where you can choose the amount that you're going to contribute as an employer, and then your employee's tax withholdings too. So we just want to give a little glance into what our settings looks like here at Poppins.
Okay, so why a contract matters. So a contract is basically something that we put in to protect not just the nanny, but also the family. So some of the ways that it protects the nanny is it guarantees that you're getting paid the agreed upon rate that you interviewed for, and that there's no questions. It's very clear cut. Also puts your schedule in writing. It lets you know when you have paid time off, which holidays are paid. It should lay out the any guidelines that are around that. So if the nanny family wants to choose PTO, or if you get to choose it, industry standard is that the nanny does get to choose all their PTO. But I have heard of some families kind of giving putting some limits on you. So it really just depends. And then also just making sure that it states in there that you do get overtime. So in Minnesota, it is legally, Minnesota state law is 40 hours, but because it's a federal law for all nannies to get overtime at 40 hours a week, we qualify for 40 hours a week. That's when we get time and a half. So anything worked over that in the work week should be listed out in there. It also protects you from job creep. So listing out your job duties and also just making it super clear for the family too. So what the expectations are, everything should be listed in there so that there's no questions about, am I supposed to do the children's laundry or not? Is that an expectation that we set or not? It's also important to note and that these can change. So as the children grow, so if you start with them as an infant, their needs are going to change by the time they're a toddler, right? So the goal is to, like, especially within those first 3 years, that's kind of when nannies thrive. So things will change, children's laundry, feeding, things like that. We do have a full list on my website that we kind of went over, like duties and what you can expect from a nanny and what you shouldn't expect. And there's a full thing. And I think Hannah has a link for that she can drop, but we can also send that out later too. And then also it just provides documentation if a dispute arises. So it basically helps prevent any kind of conflict that potentially could come up based on duties or based on the schedule. So we just want to make sure that that is clear on both sides. So ways that it protects the family: sets clear expectations from day one. So there's no worry about if this is an expectation, if it's not, kind of like just like the nanny side, right? So it also reduces misunderstandings about duties and boundaries. Kind of the same thing for the nanny side. It documents termination terms to avoid conflict too. So anything in there should be stated in there, like what the terms are. Minnesota is an at-will state, but there can also be things in there like things that qualify for immediate termination. If the child, like one of those would be like if the child is ever in danger, right? So that contract should lay all that out so there's no question on either end what could terminate the contract. And then it also just shows the nanny that they are valued and seen as a professional. So really having a work agreement or a contract not only helps both sides, but it helps the industry as well, like helps us have a profession. And then those are just some of the things that we recommend having in your contract and work agreement. And also Poppins Payroll they just redid their contract. So they have a free nanny contract that will be available for download through their website. And I think we're also going to send the link out for that as well in the follow-up email. And then perfect. Okay, so having the conversation about legal pay. You need to be paid legally. You want to be paid legally. And odds are your family wants to pay you legally as well, but we have to have a conversation. So kind of what we were talking about, or what I was talking about earlier, is transitioning from like being a nanny in high school to making it your career. Like, it's something, I'm not one for confrontation. I hate it. And I think a lot of nannies in the industry do as well. And I also think that there are probably families who don't like to talk about it either. So really just sitting down, I always say, the more information you know, the better like self-confidence you'll have. And because we are like, it's not crazy to ask to be paid legally, right? Like every other industry is. So there's no difference between us being paid legally and somebody else. Your odds are your bosses are being paid on the books as well. So it's just something that you have to really, like I said, kind of learn what the laws are and what you're entitled to so that you can have that self-confidence. And it doesn't have to be an awkward conversation. I always say the best way to do it is if you're working with a family now and you aren't being paid legally, but you kind of know that you should be, and they kind of know that they should be paying you too, but you're at that like in-between point of who's going to say something first, right? Ask for a review. And it doesn't even have to be like a year-long review. It can just be a 3-month, a 6-month, just a check-in, right? So any kind of conversation, I recommend saying that not like, don't do it on the clock. set a review up for after the end of the day, or put it in the calendar so that there's no feelings about like, oh, well, you're using up this time or whatever. Like, it's off the books. You're just having a conversation about everything. And then these are some of the questions that you could bring up during that. But also, if you're looking for a new job or you are starting over and you want to make sure that you're being paid legally, bring it up in the interviews. Like, make sure that this is something that you are like implementing from step one, right? Even the meeting of them. And I know like some of the Facebook groups here, they always have on there too, like, are you going to follow Minnesota laws or legal pay, things like that. So that's a great way too to like use that as fuel to bring it up in the conversation, because they're already kind of expecting it. And they already usually said that they are going to do that. So just one of those things to kind of plug into that. And then I don't know if we have another slide for this or... Perfect. I'll hand it over to Molly.
Perfect. So we're going to give just a little example of with Poppins, the employee cubby that you get access to. So let me just share my screen here. All right. This is one of my favorite things that we offer here at Poppins, is the employee cubby. It's one place that any employee can log into, access all of their payroll history, have their tax documents in one place. It's just nice to have something that you can log into and also see everything. So I just want to give a really quick example of this. This is my employee that I have listed, Snoop Roach. It's my dog. It's not a real person. But in here we have Snoop's employee cubby. There's the payroll history, tax documents, which is going to be the W-2, all of that information that you need for filing your taxes. There's an invite section. So if you have multiple employers that use Poppins, there's a place that you can add in that other employer and then have everything in one place, which is so helpful. And then we also offer a reference letter builder. So you can go in there and you can request a reference from any of your employers so that when you're moving on to a new position, a really nice document for you to come to with a new, employer. Some really cool tools. And we've been continuing to build off of this over the past year. So I know there's a lot more to come with the employee cubby. But I wanted to give an example of the payroll history. I've been paying my employee pretty poorly the past couple of weeks, but to give you an example of a good payroll, and let me just get this downloaded here. All right, here is a pay stub. And this is really important for being a household employee, that you can have something for, if you're getting a house, you're getting a car loan, pay stubs are going to be what you need to get all of that. But in here, here's just a good example of, it shows the regular rate and the gross wages. It's going to have your year-to-date totals on here. And then, of course, at the bottom, tell you your net pay that you're getting. Just nice to have something that you can download really easily as an employee and, provide to whoever you need. Maybe you're getting an apartment, like we've been talking about, many different reasons to have a legitimate pay stub from your employer, which is really nice. And then at the very bottom of a pay stub, if your employer sets up a PTO policy, that would populate there for you. And then sick time, Minnesota requires a sick time policy for your employer to establish. So you can always keep track of that on your pay stubs each pay period. Perfect. And Hannah, I'm going to give it back to you.
So thanks, Molly.
Yeah.
All right. We're just going to do a quick summary. Molly, take it away.
Perfect. Okay, so legal pay protects your future. We cannot say it enough. As you can see from just us talking a little bit, there's so many benefits for being paid above board. From housing loans to retirement credits, your W-2 status opens a door that a 1099 could never. So be paid on the books. Advocate for yourself. Tell every employee I talk to, advocate for yourself. You have the right to ask. So raising legal pay in interviews is professional and it's not awkward. Most families respect it. And I think, just like we're saying, advocate for yourself. Make sure you come knowing what Minnesota requires as far as minimum wage, sick time, all of that. Advocate for yourself. That's the biggest thing I could say. A contract is your professional foundation. So it protects you, sets those expectations, and it shows the family that you take this job seriously. And it just lays out everything so that if there is ever a conflict, you can always reference that as an employee too. And then the biggest one, paid family leave is here, but only for W-2 employees. So being on the books is the only way to access it for this brand new benefit this year. Could not recommend it enough. I just think that's so great that more and more states are doing this. You know, it's just something you pay into, and you should get that benefit if something ever was to happen. So
next, we're going to dive into a Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, in the comments. Feel free to unmute yourself. And then we did have to go ahead. I know we did have a few questions in the sign up form too, which we can go over if nobody has any questions right now, but I'll open up the floor.
That's right. Sorry. I was going to pop in. Not a question, but also a plug. We also have International Nanny Training Day coming up. So on April 11th, I'm not sure if anybody has been to one before. I think Chelsea, I see you clapping. I know she has. So these are great tools. Like we're gonna have a couple great speakers. I'm gonna be one of those too. So we'll kind of go over the legal part of this, contracts, what you should have in place, what you shouldn't. And then we also have a social hour this year that we didn't have last time too. So we'll make sure to send out the sign up link in the email, and maybe we can pop it in here. I could probably find it super quick and put it in the chat as well. But if you have any questions on that, please feel free to reach out. Also, any questions about anything at any time, I'm always available by email. So just shoot me an email. And then, okay, back to Q&A.
There is the link to INNTD 2026 if you need it. But yeah, does anyone have any questions, or we could jump into some of the ones that were submitted in the form? Okay. All right. So one of the first questions that we got was, what is a good age to retire as a nanny?
Oh, that's a really good question. So, I mean, if somebody came to me and was asking that, I would probably say it'd be like the Social Security, age. I believe that's 62, 63, right around there. But because you would be a W-2 employee, you would be paying into Social Security and Medicare. So that's a huge benefit of, being paid on the books, so you could definitely get those benefits when it comes time. But I'd probably say you would follow the same as like anybody else who would be eligible to retire at that age.
Awesome. Rachel, you see that question?
I do, but what's HPF? Is that high profile family? Yeah, so kind of just going through everything. The family that I've been with now, which is going on 6 years, they found me on care.com. So that is right before COVID and all that stuff happened. That is actually how they found me. So
okay. We have another question. It says, I have 2 weeks of PTO and 5 days of sick time. I never use my sick time. Am I allowed to use the sick time for medical appointments?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
I'm also going to just add to that too. It's not one of the ways, because I know like us as nannies, right? Our job is to kind of be there in those sick kid times too. So we build up an immune system, and not a lot of us get sick very often. One of the things that we do at the agency is at the end of contract, we require our families to pay it out. So that way we don't feel like at the end, like we have to use everything or lose it. It helps. Every family that we've talked to are like, oh, that's a really good idea. But I just think it's one of those things that nobody really knows about or like even thinks about. So it's very common for ESST to be paid out too. So that's just something that we require. So as a nanny, like you could definitely work that into your contract. And that way, if you're not using your PTO or your sick time, like you still get benefits of it because you're still earning it.
Okay. Another question we have is, how should an overnight nanny be paid?
That's a great question. So, this comes up quite a bit because being an overtime nanny, I mean, that comes up a lot. In this case, we would have the employer reach out to Minnesota Department of Labor for just some more guidance on that. Our system is definitely set up, though, to handle a regular time, overtime rates, if that applies for that overtime stay. There's an additional line where they can do like a lump sum. So the payroll side of everything is really set up to accommodate how you need to be paid for that overnight stay. But we would definitely direct your employer to kind of contact the state for more guidance on that. And then we would help assist them to make sure that the payroll is correct.
Okay. Another question that we have is, are there any legal protections for part-time nannies, PTO, sick time, PMFL, etc.? For example, if you have two part-time nanny families rather than one full-time.
Yeah, great question. I mean, so everything still applies even though you're part-time. So sick leave is 1 hour for every 30 hours worked, capped at 48 hours for the week. Even though you're part-time, all of those things are still going to apply. A lot of the different things that we talked about in this webinar too, such as paid family leave, all of that is still going to apply. So there's really not a whole lot that changes. For us, you would be considered in a nanny share if you have two different employers. And because you're employed by two different families, you technically have two different employers. So everything is pretty separate. But what I would recommend to any employer calling in, or if a nanny called in with any questions with this, is start off with that contract. We could not say that enough to anybody. So it really breaks down to what the responsibilities are for the two families and how you're going to be paid by those two different families.
Awesome. Another question we have kind of following up that contract is, how do you address mileage pay in a contract?
Yeah, mileage pay comes up quite a bit. We follow the federal regulations, which I believe is 63 cents. I'd have to look it at. Am I wrong, Rachel? Is he shaking your head?
It's 0.725 for this year.
Okay, it's up a lot higher than what I was just saying. But we do have within payroll a place that they can do a non-taxable amount, which is typically for mileage or reimbursement. So your employer would just calculate that and put it in as a lump sum under reimbursement, and that would be a part of your paycheck. What are the breaks required in Minnesota for a full-time nanny? Yeah, so for every 4 hours worked, you're required to have a 15-minute break. And then for every 8 hours worked, you also get a 30-minute break. So that's something, again, I would talk with your employers about what that looks like for you, especially if you're watching the children. Typically what I hear from different nannies in situations is they're taking those breaks when the child's down for like a nap or whatnot, but that's something you would really talk about with your employer, because you are required to have those breaks.
Yeah, and kind of how I can piggyback off that with the agency and stuff. So as nannies, like we can't actually ever go fully on break. So the way that we go around that is like we aren't allowed to take like unpaid breaks. So all of our breaks would be paid. And then we encourage the nannies to have their downtime or their break time when it lines up with the kids' schedule. So if they're in a nap or if they're eating, you like as nannies, we kind of play that out and figure it out. But it's important that we're getting paid for those and that we're kind of encouraged as well. So a lot of the families are like, how do we support that, or how do we help or make sure that? So just kind of as a reminder, let them know like, hey, you're going to maybe see me reading a book for the first 15 minutes when the kid's down for a nap, or just making sure the communication is there and that's also laid out in your contract of like, okay, break times are going to happen when we have them. And then also this is kind of what they're going to look like kind of thing too. So you're never allowed to actually leave the house unless the family comes back and leaves you too. So you can also have that in the contract. If they both work from home and they're like, oh yeah, you can go have a 30-minute break, that wouldn't be paid. So just kind of lining all that up prior to starting the job, or even having a conversation now, right? Oh, I learned that these are my legal, what I'm entitled to kind of thing. How can we make sure that I'm not having burnout and able to take these breaks? Or sometimes how am I able to, making sure I'm able to pee, right? So those are all things that if you have them laid out ahead of time, it really helps clear any of that air.
Okay, last question I have from some of the responses. So if you have any other questions, feel free to throw them in the chat now. But the last question is, if my employer agrees to pay me over the table, what would those first steps of the process look like with Poppins or, you know, any payroll provider?
Yeah, great question. So the onboarding process is done by the employer, just going to poppinspayroll.com. They'll sign up as an employer and then do the onboarding portion for the employee. So it's kind of all done by the employer getting everything started. They'll provide the employee with an I-9 and then the W-4, any just state withholding certificates that any state might have as well. And they'll provide it to the employee to fill out. They'll need those documents back, especially for their records as a household employer. And then they'll finish onboarding you into Poppins. But from there, that whole process takes about 20 minutes for the employer to get done. So it's a pretty fast process. And then we really take over for the employer with getting everything set up for them to file those taxes for you and your employer quarterly. So Poppins is in the background once we see a new person sign up with us. And we just start getting everything together so we can make sure taxes are filed correctly for you guys. And then also at the end of the year, preparing those year-end documents as well for you and your employer. But poppinspayroll.com.
All right. Does anyone else have any other last minute questions? Okay. If you do have any more questions, feel free to reach out to us at info@Poppins Payroll. If you want to talk to someone from the Poppins team, if you want to get in touch with Rachel, it'll be rachel@nurturingnannies.us. Just mention you attended the webinar and let us know any questions, any thoughts that you may have, and we'll get back to you immediately. And then, Rachel, is there anything else you wanted to say about INNTD? I think you're on mute.
I'm on mute because that is what I do. I would just say it's also a great benefit. So for any employers watching this, like it's a great tool to be able to send your pay the way for your nanny so that they can go get some extra support and have a community. Also, it's a great place that sometimes they meet nannies and they can do play dates with. It's just a really good resource for them to kind of have in there. Should sick and safe time be located on payroll as in the hours accrued? Yes, it's actually legally required for that. And I know Poppins Payroll takes care of that too. So when you log into your dashboard or whatever you guys call it, your cubby, that'll be visible in there.
Yep, and it'll be on every pay stub too. So once the employer sets up that policy in their profile, every pay stub that you get on payday will show how much you've accrued in sick and safe leave.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for all the great questions. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining.